The snow was falling softly over Winterfell, the home of House Stark. Years had passed since the war had scattered the family, but the North was still cold, still hard, and still loyal to its true rulers. After the Red Wedding, Robb Stark was thought to be dead, but in this version of the tale, he had narrowly escaped death. With the help of a few loyal men, he vanished into the shadows of the North. Sansa, now wiser after her time in King's Landing, returned home quietly. And Jon Snow, though bound to the Night's Watch, had found a way to be free without breaking his oath, with the help of Maester Aemon and a secret deal. They were not the same young Starks they once were. Robb was more cautious, Sansa more cunning, and Jon more experienced in both war and diplomacy. They knew the North needed to unite, but they also knew war would only break it further. Too many had died already. They had to do something different. Robb sent secret messages to the heads of each northern house. He didn't ask for swords or blood. He asked for ears. He wanted to speak, not fight. Many ignored the letters. Some thought it a trap. But the name Stark still meant something. Slowly, one by one, the northern lords began to come curious, cautious, but willing to listen. In the great hall of Winterfell, Robb stood beside Sansa and Jon. The hall wasn't filled with banners or guards, but with voices and minds. Sansa greeted each lord personally. She remembered their names, their children, their old loyalties. Jon spoke from experience, of what he had seen beyond the wall and in the south. He didn't speak like a commander. He spoke like a man who had seen too much and wanted peace. Robb stepped forward. "We don't come here to command," he said. "We come to unite. The North has always been strong when we stand together, and weak when we fight ourselves. We've lost fathers, brothers, and sons. We cannot lose our future." There was silence at first, then murmurs, then voices raised, not in anger, but in concern. They talked of taxes, of old feuds, of mistrust between houses. Sansa listened closely, noting who said what. She whispered to Jon, who later stood and addressed each concern not with promises, but with plans. Small, smart steps. Robb met with Lord Manderley, a powerful man with a sharp tongue. "I don't trust broken kings," Manderley said coldly. Robb replied, "Then trust your people. They still believe in House Stark." Sansa met with Lady Dustin, who had never cared for the Starks. "You think words can undo years of bitterness?" she asked. Sansa looked her in the eyes. "No, but I believe people can choose not to pass that bitterness to their children." Jon gathered the younger sons of noble families, those tired of war. "What if your children never see a battlefield? What if they only read about war in old books?" They looked at him like he was mad, but some also looked hopeful. By the end of the first gathering, nothing was promised. But something had changed. A new kind of war had started not with swords, but with words. And for the first time in many years, the North began to think, not just of revenge, but of rebuilding. Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside Winterfell, something was thawing. Days turned into weeks at Winterfell. The halls were no longer silent. They buzzed with quiet conversations and careful planning. For the first time in years, bannermen who once hated each other sat under the same roof. Old rivalries weren't forgotten, but they were softened, not by love, but by exhaustion. The North was tired of blood. Robb, Sansa, and Jon knew that well, and they used it. Robb spent his days riding through the surrounding lands, visiting small folk and minor houses. He didn't wear a crown or armor. He dressed like a Northman, spoke like a brother. People didn't cheer, they nodded. In the North, that meant more. He listened to their troubles. Lost livestock, broken roads, burned villages. He promised to fix them, not with gold, but with work. "We'll rebuild together," he'd say. Not for a lord, but for the North. Sansa worked behind the scenes. Every night, after the fires died down, she invited key lords and ladies to her chambers, not for seduction, but for something far more powerful: conversation. She had learned from Cersei, from Littlefinger, even from Margaery. Now she used that knowledge to influence quietly. A soft word here, a compliment there, a reminder of old honor. She knew how to make people feel important and how to make them feel seen. Jon, meanwhile, handled the most difficult task of all, bringing the free folk into the fold. He knew that if the North was to survive the coming winter, it couldn't keep pretending the Wall still divided people. He rode to the edge of the Gift, where wildling clans had settled. Some still saw him as the bastard of Winterfell. Others saw him as the one who let them live. Tormund Jantsbane met him with a grin. "Come to freeze your balls off again, Crow?" Jon smirked. "I came to ask for help." Tormund listened as Jon spoke of unity, of peace, of a North where the free folk weren't hunted, and where they could be more than ghosts of the forest. Some wildlings laughed at the idea. Others saw the fire in Jon's eyes. "Peace?" one elder spat. "We were never given peace. Why give it now?" Jon's voice didn't rise. "Because if we don't, we'll burn when winter comes." All of us. Back at Winterfell, a new problem stirred. Some northern lords didn't like the idea of wildlings living among them. "Savages," Lord Glover called them. "Thieves," muttered another. Robb slammed his hand on the table. "They bled for us at the Wall. They've lost more than we have." Sansa added, "If we turn them away, we repeat the mistakes of the South, fighting each other while the real threat comes in silence." Still, some didn't bend. That night, Robb walked alone through the crypts of Winterfell. He stood before the statue of his father, Eddard Stark. "You always said to do what's right," he whispered. "Even if it hurts." Jon found him there. "You're building something that hasn't been done before," Jon said. Robb looked tired. "It's harder than war, which means it's probably worth it." Winter was still falling heavy over the North, but the people were starting to change. Not because they were ordered to, but because they were given a reason to believe. This wasn't about ruling. It was about surviving. And the Stark children, now grown, now forged in fire and loss, were finally shaping a new kind of North. One without bloodshed. One with hope, but hope, like fire, attracts shadows. And far in the east, in a darkened room, someone was watching the North's unity grow with quiet fury in their heart. The raven came at dawn-black wings, dark message. Sansa read it first. Her face went still as ice. She didn't speak right away. She just handed it to Robb and stepped back. The words were few, but the meaning was heavy. The Lannisters march north. Not with armies, but with gold. They mean to break you without war. Robb crushed the parchment in his fist. "They're buying loyalty," Sansa said, her voice low. "Not from lords, from the people. Traders, blacksmiths, hungry mouths. The Lannisters want to starve Winterfell from the inside out." Jon leaned on the wooden table, eyes sharp. "A war of coins." "And whispers," Sansa added. "Lord Shawin sent word last night." 3 of his best men vanished after meeting with southern guests. It wasn't hard to guess what was happening. While the North worked to rebuild itself, the South was sending shadows promises of wealth, security, even titles. No swords, no open threats, just temptation. That was harder to fight than steel. Robb was furious. "I offered peace, unity, and they choose silver over blood?" Sansa shook her head. "Not all of them. But gold spreads faster than trust." That day, Winterfell tightened its guard, but not with blades. With eyes. Sansa created a quiet network of servants, traders, and even children who listened more than they spoke. They watched who came and went, who spoke too kindly of Lannister gold, who suddenly dressed better or drank southern wine. The traders didn't wear red cloaks. They wore smiles. Jon, meanwhile, focused on the free folk. He knew the Lannisters would never offer them anything but death, but he also knew the wildlings weren't quick to trust Starks either. So he went back to the woods, sat at fires, shared meat, told stories. Not like a lord, but like a brother. Slowly, walls lowered. The free folk began to see this wasn't a trap. It was a chance. One night, Tormund said, "If the South wants to buy the North, let them try. Our loyalty isn't for sale." Jon looked at him. "Neither is our silence. I need your voice." So it was that a free folk leader stood before northern lords in Winterfell and said, "We came through fire and death to be here. We're not like you, but we're not your enemies. If we can trust this bastard," he slapped Jon on the back, "then maybe you can trust us too." There was laughter, uneasy, but real. And in the north, that mattered, but cracks still formed. Whispers reached Robb's ears. Some lords questioned why he hadn't declared himself king again. Others wondered if he was too weak to deal with traitors. "Unity without power is just noise," said Lord Umber behind closed doors. Sansa knew what was happening. "They smell weakness because we haven't punished anyone." Robb replied, "If we kill those who disagree, we're no better than the Boltons. But if we let them plot freely," she said, "we'll end up like father, honorable and dead." The hardest decisions were coming. Not against enemies from the south, but enemies within. Hidden in plain sight. Wearing Stark colors, speaking with northern tongues, but bowing to southern coins. One night, Robb called a private council. Sansa, Jon, a few trusted allies. There, he finally said the words he had avoided for weeks. "If I must wear the crown again, not for glory, but to protect the North, I will." Sansa looked at him, proud but worried. "And if they don't all kneel?" Robb's eyes burned like coals. "Then they've chosen their side?" Far beyond the walls of Winterfell, in a cold cave lit by a dying fire, a figure watched the flames. She was old, cloaked. Her eyes glowed red. "They are close," she whispered, "closer than ever. But unity demands sacrifice." A raven flew from her shoulder into the night, heading north. The true test was coming. And this time, it wouldn't be fought with steel. It would be fought with souls. Snow fell heavier now. Thick, silent, endless. The north was slowly being buried in white, but Winterfell burned bright like a stubborn flame. Inside its walls, meetings stretched late into the night. Food was rationed more carefully, and messages flew like restless birds. The crownless king had made his choice. Robb Stark would rise again, not to rule with fear, but to protect what was left of his blood and soil. The whispers had grown bold. Lords who once showed quiet doubt now spoke more openly. One Lord Slate didn't even lower his voice when he said over dinner, "A wolf that won't bite shouldn't lead the pack." Robb heard. He didn't respond. Not yet. But the next morning, Slate's personal guards were found drunk in a brothel outside Winterfell, stripped of their weapons, shamed. No blood, no death, just humiliation. A quiet warning. Sansa's web was working. Still more trouble brewed. A raven arrived from Deepwood Knot. The Lannisters had made their biggest move yet. They offered the North full independence on paper, if they accepted a Southern appointed warden to oversee peace. Jon slammed his fist against the wall. A Southern wolf in a Northern den. That's not independence. That's a leash. They want us to sell our pride and call it freedom, Sansa said coldly. And some will buy it. Robb gathered the lords again, not in secret this time. In public, in the great hall, under the banners of House Stark. This time, he wore no armor, no sword. Just a fur cloak and the weight of history on his shoulders. "I will not ask you to kneel," Robb said, his voice carrying like thunder. "But I will ask you to stand with me, or against me." The hall went still. He walked through them slowly, looking each one in the eye. "The South thinks we are broken, divided. They are trying to poison us with gold and promises. But I've seen what they do to people who trust them. Ask Sansa what they did to her. Ask Jon what he's seen behind their walls." Some looked down. Some looked away, but none spoke. "I am not your king," Robb continued. "Not unless you make me one. But if I lead, I will not lead with a crown of lies. I will not sell our land for peace that isn't real. And I will not wait until the South sends swords instead of whispers." Silence. Then, from the back of the hall, came a voice. "I lost my son fighting for you once, Robb Stark," said Lord Trewin. "And I said I'd never follow another boy." He stepped forward. "But you're no boy now. You're the only damn wolf left with a spine. I'll follow you again." Others followed. House after house stood. Not all, but enough. That night, the North named Robb Stark, not king but protector. A new title, a new start. He would not rule as a king of war, but as a shield against what was coming. It was Sansa's idea. Jon approved it. It was clever, careful, exactly what the North needed. But in the shadows of Winterfell, a man was listening. He wore no sigil. He spoke to no one. But he passed messages through cracks in the stone, left coins under beds, and whispered to frightened maids. He was a Lannister's man, not a knight, not a lord, just a servant of chaos. And his next message was simple. The wolf grows bold. Clip his claws before he draws blood. In King's Landing, Cersei read those words with a cruel smile. So the wolves think they can outsmart the lion. "Let's see how long they howl before winter eats them alive," she whispered. And far beyond the wall, something older than war, older than kings, stirred under the ice. The North was waking. But so was something else. The storm hit harder than any in years. Winds howled through the North like angry ghosts, and snow piled so high that roads vanished, villages were buried, and even ravens struggled to fly. Winter had come truly, fully, and with it came hunger, sickness, and silence. But inside Winterfell, the fire refused to die. Robb had begun sending small hunting parties to nearby lands to gather meat and supplies. Jon personally led one into the Wolfswood, despite Sansa's protests. "You're too important to risk," she told him. "And if the people see me risk nothing, they'll never believe in us," Jon answered. The trip was brutal. The wind cut like knives, and the animals were scarce. But Jon's presence lifted the spirits of the men. When they returned with meat and even a captured deer, the mood inside Winterfell rose for the first time in weeks. The North was still starving, but now it was starving with hope. But not all was well. In the lower halls of the castle, the servant girl Lily went missing. 2 days later, her body was found near the well, her throat cut. No signs of struggle, no footprints, just red in the snow. Robb ordered a full investigation. Sansa dug deeper. This wasn't random. It was a message. That same night, one of the ravens from the rookery was found dead, pinned to the wall with a Lannister dagger. Jon stared at it grimly. "They're not sending armies. They're sending ghosts." Sansa nodded. "And they're already inside." They knew what it meant. The South spy network had burrowed deep. No one could be fully trusted. Even servants. Especially servants. So Robb called for the oldest weapon the North knew loyalty born of fear and frost. He summoned one, the giant who had survived the battle at the wall, now quiet but still strong. The free folk still followed him like a legend. Robb placed him in charge of guarding the gates and halls at night. No shadow slips past him, Robb said, and it worked, for a time. But then came the dream. Bran. Jon woke in a cold sweat, gasping. He had seen Bran older, distant, almost broken. He was standing beneath a weirwood tree, eyes white, voice like wind. "You are all blind to what's coming. You fight shadows while the dead begin to march." Jon told no one at first. Dreams were often strange. But this one felt different. Real. Bran had always been strange, but this felt like something more. A warning. He went to Sansa. "Do you believe Bran could still be alive?" She looked at him. "I believe if he is, We need him. Now, Robb agreed. If the dead are marching, no title will save us. Not protector. Not king. So they made a decision. Secret, quiet, risky. Jon would ride north of the wall. To find Bran. To find the truth. It was madness. But it was necessary. Robb stayed behind to hold the north together. Sansa would keep the court and spies in check. Jon would go where others feared. Before leaving, Jon stood on the walls of Winterfell with Robb. Snow swirled between them. Are we doing the right thing? Robb asked. Jon gave a sad smile. I don't know anymore. But we're doing something. And in the north, that's better than silence. He left at dawn with a few free folk, Tormund at his side, ghosts trailing silently behind. As Winterfell faded behind them, Jon Snow rode into a land colder than death and deeper than fear. What he would find there would change everything. And while he rode north, in a hidden room beneath the castle, a raven fluttered into a torch-lit chamber, landing on the shoulder of a cloaked figure. Sansa waited in the shadows. The figure turned. Arya Stark, back from death, from vengeance. From the edge of the world, Sansa spoke first. We have enemies inside our walls. And I need a ghost. Arya smiled. Then you called the right shadow. Snow still fell over Winterfell, but now there was something colder in the air than winter calculation. Arya Stark walked through the stone halls like a whisper. No one noticed her, not really. They saw a servant girl, or a quiet maid, or sometimes nothing at all. That was her gift. Faces were masks, and she had collected many. But this time, she wasn't here for revenge. She was here to protect her pack. Sansa had told her everything, the Lannister coins, the murdered girl, the dead raven. Arya only nodded once. Find who's behind it, Sansa had said. Find them. Make sure they don't leave this castle alive. Arya didn't need more. Each night she watched, listened, followed whispers in the dark. She found hidden messages under beds, Lannister coins buried in flour sacks, secret meetings between stable boys and riders who never gave their names. And then she found the real monster. A man dressed as a healer, with soft hands and a southern accent buried under fake northern speech. He came from the kitchens, seemed harmless, but he asked too many questions. He never looked cold. And the night Arya followed him, he led her to a room beneath the library, where a small chest held poison, false letters, and a red wax seal with a lion's paw. She slit his throat without a word. But before he died, he whispered, "You can kill 1,000 rats, girl. But the lion keeps breeding." She left his body where no one would ever find it. When she returned to Sansa, she said only, "One down." Sansa didn't smile. There are more. Meanwhile, Jon Snow was facing a different kind of silence. North of the wall, the world had gone dead. No birds, no animals, just wind and white. He and Tormund rode for days, ghosts scouting ahead. The free folk with them grew more uneasy with each mile. Old stories came back, of shadows that moved when no one walked, of whispers under the ice. But Jon pressed on. Then one night, Ghost disappeared. Jon followed the tracks through thick snow until they vanished at the edge of a frozen river. And then he heard the voice, soft, familiar. Bran. He turned, and standing beneath a tall, ancient weirwood tree, glowing red in the snow, was his brother. Older, paler, eyes empty, and yet all-seeing. "You shouldn't have come," Bran said. His voice wasn't cruel, just distant, like it came from somewhere far behind the eyes. Jon stepped closer. "We need you. The North needs you." Bran looked up at the sky. "The Night King is dead, but death is not. It waits, Jon. It always waits." Jon didn't understand. "You said the dead were marching. I didn't say they were men." Then Bran's eyes rolled white, and the tree itself seemed to groan. Snow exploded from the ground, and for a moment, Jon saw visions. Winterfell burning. Sansa in chains. Arya with a dagger dripping red. Robb standing alone in a hall of bones. And something beneath the ground, waking. Then the vision ended. Bran's voice came again, fainter now. Return. Warn them. The war they're preparing for is not the war that's coming. Jon reached for him, but Bran vanished like smoke. He stood alone beneath the tree, the snow falling harder now. Tormund appeared from the woods, breathless. Ghost is back, but he's hurt. Jon turned, his heart racing. We're leaving. Now. Back at Winterfell, Robb stood in the Godswood alone. He had just received news of Arya's return, and the traitor she had killed. But instead of peace, a weight pressed on his chest. He could feel it. A storm was building, not from the south, not from beyond the wall, from beneath their feet. And in the lowest crypt of Winterfell, where the dead of House Stark lay buried, a chill spread that had nothing to do with winter. A raven sat on the stone of Lyanna Stark's tomb. Its eyes were no longer black. They glowed ice blue. Jon Snow rode like fire was chasing him. The wind screamed. The horses bled from the cold. Ghost limped beside him, his white fur stained with wounds and frost. But Jon didn't stop, couldn't stop. What he had seen beneath that weirwood, what Bran had become. It wasn't just magic or prophecy. It was a warning. Winterfell wasn't safe anymore. The enemy wasn't outside the walls. It was already inside them. Beneath them, awakening. By the time he reached the gates, the snow was waist-high, and the guards didn't even recognize him at first. When they did, they dropped to their knees. Jon barely acknowledged them. He rushed inside, Ghost dragging behind, eyes flicking toward the crypts. He found Sansa first. She was in the solar, speaking with Arya in hushed tones. When she saw Jon, his face pale, his cloak frozen, his eyes hollow, she stood at once. What happened? She asked, already afraid of the answer. It's not the South, Jon said. It's not the Lannisters. It's something older. Bran showed me no, warned me. The dead. They're waking, not from the north, from here. From under us. Arya frowned. You mean the crypts? Jon nodded. He didn't say how or why, but something is coming up. Something that's waited for years. Sansa went still. The dead Starks? They won't stay dead. Robb entered moments later, winded. A raven came. One of the Free Folk scouts saw blue flames in the ice caverns west of the wall. No men, just shadows. They stood in silence. The 3 remaining Stark children, and the bastard who had always been one of them. Robb was the first to break it. We seal the crypts. No, but it was too late. At that exact moment, in the cold dark beneath Winterfell, something ancient moved. Dust fell from the stone ceilings. The statues of the old kings of winter cracked. And from the tomb of Lyanna Stark came a sound, breathing, but not warm, living breath. Cold, hollow, eternal. That night, the ground beneath Winterfell shook. People screamed. Fires were lit. Men ran through the halls with torches, unsure of what they were fighting. No one had seen an army, no banners, no enemy at the gates. But still something was wrong. In the great hall, Robb stood fully armored. Arya beside him, blades ready. Jon with Ghost at his heel. Sansa stood on the balcony above, giving orders to the guards, her face like stone. Suddenly, a scream cut through the air. From below, then another, and another. The crypts had opened. Not with fire, not with magic, but with memories. The dead of House Stark old kings, long-forgotten sons, buried warriors had risen, but not as White Walkers. No glowing blue eyes, no ice blades. They walked like men, but they remembered nothing of honor, nothing of love, only wrath. It was as if the land itself had grown tired of holding their bones. Jon and Arya led the charge down. The stone steps shook under their feet. What they saw chilled them more than the cold ever could. Ned Stark's tomb had been torn apart. His body was gone. Lyanna's stone was shattered. Benjen's grave was empty. And at the far end of the crypt, where the light barely reached, stood a figure cloaked in dust and frost. Jon stepped forward. "Father?" But the thing that turned wasn't Ned Stark anymore. Its eyes were gray. Not blue, not dead, just empty. It didn't speak. It just raised a hand. And behind it, from every crack, every wall, every buried corner of the crypt, they came. A dozen, then dozens more. Robb arrived just in time. "Fall back. Seal the upper gates." "No," Jon growled. "We finish it here." Arya was already moving. Spinning, cutting, silent, and deadly. Jon fought beside her, his sword lone claw gleaming in the torchlight. Ghost lunged at the ankles of a once proud Stark general. But the dead didn't fall like they used to. They remembered how to fight. Sansa screamed orders above. Boil the oil. Light the tunnels. Then, suddenly, a massive boom echoed through the halls, and fire poured into the crypts from above. Not wildfire, dragonfire. From the sky outside, a great beast circled Drogon, and riding him, wrapped in black and red, Daenerys Targaryen, returned, changed, and very much alive. She hovered in the sky, her voice cutting through the storm. "You built your kingdom on graves. Now the dead want their crown back."